Hi book friends, welcome back to Books and Tea Time, or welcome if this is your first time here with us. I'm Addie, and today we are going to be doing my autumn wrap-up. So, for those of you who are new, you may not know this, but I like to do my wrap-ups seasonally for a couple different reasons. I don't film monthly TBR or wrap-up videos just because I can't really keep up with that kind of output, and I don't love making so many of the same type of video. I would rather do vlogs and different things like that, but I do like to wrap up seasonally. I'm a mood reader, so I don't really make monthly TBRs, but I do make a seasonal TBR shelf with the books that I'm most immediately interested in, although I don't really stick to that either. So today we're just going to talk about the 15 books that I read in autumn, which is basically from late August, early September to early December, all the books that I read in that chunk of time. So the first book that I read was Hello Girls, and it's by two different authors, and I don't remember the name of the authors because I didn't write them on this piece of paper. I think it's Brittany Calavero and Emily Henry. Listen to the audiobook for Hello Girls because I was just drawn to this story. I don't know why. It just seemed like a cute contemporary read, and I don't read a lot of contemporary, so this ended up being a huge dud for me, not because it was contemporary, just because I don't think it was meant for my age. This one is kind of limited to a particular age range in terms of enjoyment, I think. Not all YA is like that. A lot of YA, I think, in my opinion, can be read by all age ranges and still have an impact depending on what age you are. But there are some, I think, that are really meant to capture the experience of a particular age group, and this one was one of those for me. So I ended up giving this book a 2 out of 5 stars, which sounds a little harsh, but I really did not like it. So this book is about two friends in high school who meet outside of a police station. One wants to turn in their brother, I think, and the other one wants to turn in their father. One is suffering from economic crises in their family and just inter-family issues, and the other one is suffering from physical and emotional abuse. So they meet outside this police station and they decide that they are going to become best of friends to get through their final year of high school before they leave, but then a bunch of stuff happens and they end up going on this road trip to Las Vegas, and basically you follow that road trip. So there's a lot of action, a lot of plot things that happen, but for me the characters just feel like empty shells and caricatures or stereotypes. All of the characters except for the two main characters are like bad or evil and we're supposed to hate them. And to me it just like wasn't believable that there wasn't one other person we were really meant to like, and the two main characters don't even get that much work. So I was struggling with the characters and how hollow they felt. And then in addition to that, there's like this tease that there's going to be a romance between the two main girls and a female romance, and like it's completely ignored, and it's just kind of like felt like it was thrown in there just for like extra like clout almost. Like it's just like there's one scene where I don't even remember which one it was and what the girls' names are, but one of the girls is like kind of jealous that her friend is flirting with this boy, and she like admires her in this really beautiful outfit, and then like nothing comes of it and she doesn't have any more internal thoughts about it after that, and it just felt like it was just shoved in there for the sake of being there. And I really was hoping for a romance between these two main characters, so I don't know, but I don't think it's a series, so the fact that it's just completely like glossed over kind of really bothered me. If you are like in like 8th or ninth grade, I think you would really like this. And I don't mean that in a mean way, like this book sucks but you would probably like it. I just mean like I think that I missed a lot of what was there because I wasn't in that part of my life anymore, and it just felt not like juvenile. It felt like uninteresting to me. Like I was already past that point. So maybe if you're in high school you'd like this, but I'm not going to guarantee it. The second book that I read was Gods of Jade and Shadow by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. This story is like a fantasy folklore inspired story. So we've got Mexican folklore and Mayan mythology kind of fused together, and it takes place during the Jazz Age in Mexico. We follow our main character Cassiopeia, and she lives with like her extended family, and her mother have sort of been like disowned or like demoted in their family hierarchy, and they're kind of servants to the grandfather and a bunch of other people in the family. And like one day while Cassiopeia is cleaning, she accidentally releases the Mayan god of death from this box, and they are somehow bonded by like bone magic. I don't really even know how to describe it, but she's bonded with the Mayan god of death, and she has to help him overthrow his brother, who is the current ruler of the underworld, or like the middle world, where all of these like demons and mythological and folklore characters exist. I really love books about mythology, so for that reason I really liked this book. I loved learning about Mayan mythology and seeing some of the characters I knew of from Mayan mythology represented as characters in this book was really fun. What I will say just overall, I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars because I wanted more the whole time, and I don't know if that's just a me thing, but like for example from the romance, I wanted more. There are these kind of hints between Cassiopeia and the Mayan god of death, whose name I don't think I'm going to pronounce correctly. I think it's Hunkame. While they're on this journey are kind of exchanging romantic, flirtatious vibes, and I wanted more from that, just a little bit more. I don't know. I just feel like there was like, it was a little lackluster by the end. I wanted more from like the mythological aspect. I wanted to know more about the exchange between the humans and the non-human creatures or beings in the world, and I wanted to know more about the history of Hunkame and his brother. And I feel like the end of the book was kind of too quick for me. Like the final arc or journey that Cassiopeia has to go on, I wanted more detail from it, and I think I just wanted it to be more difficult for Cassiopeia, and I didn't love her cousin and how his role was so strong in the book. I kind of felt like that part to me I wasn't super crazy about. If you like mythology, I definitely would recommend this book. I'm not saying that you shouldn't read this book. I think that this book is really good, and I loved the atmosphere and reading about Mexico during this particular historical moment, and also how the author fuses the folklore and the mythology. It's very flawless how all those things are fused together. I just think I wish the book was like 100 to 200 pages longer. The third book that I read is A Dream So Dark by L.L. McKinney. Now this is the second book in the Nightmareverse trilogy. This was an epic second book. I feel like second books in a series are either really strong, or they're kind of like a dip in the arc of the trilogy, and this one was the former. It was so strong and action-packed. This is an urban fantasy story inspired by Alice in Wonderland, and our main character, Alice Kingston, basically fights these beings called nightmares who are like in Wonderland but can come through the veil into the human world, and she fights them at like the crux between the two worlds so that she can protect the human world. And it's super cool. It's like Buffy the Vampire Slayer meets Alice in Wonderland. That's how it's described on the back, and that's how everyone describes it, and it's spot on. I mean, Alice is so cool and badass. She just like fights, and she has all these really neat weapons, and like she's got the sarcasm, she's got like the personality and this heart of gold. She's nerdy, and she just like she's just so amazing. I want to be her. I'm inspired by her every time that I read this book. Can't speak highly enough of McKinney and Alice as a character and this trilogy. I can't wait to read the third one. But speaking specifically about this one, I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars because it was stunning. The first book catches your attention with all of the cool ways that Alice in Wonderland is transformed and retold in this world. So that's really interesting. And then the second book, it just like expands like 50 times, and there's so much stuff that you just don't know, and you're constantly questioning. You're like, what about this and what about that, and like, how do all these things relate? And McKinney just keeps like, she gives you one piece of the puzzle and then you're like, oh, I get it now, and then she gives you like 3 more mysteries or like weird whimsical side plots, and you're just like, wow, I don't know anything, but like in a good way, because Alice takes you on the journey and you go and you meet all these wonderful Alice in Wonderland inspired characters. Also, I love Alice's mom. I think she's my second favorite character. Just, she's amazing. And the way that they kind of bond and reconcile in this book is really, really great. And Alice's grandma. Like, they're just like side characters that are so important because they're not inspired by Alice in Wonderland, but they just like really give life to the urban fantasy setting, I think, and the fact that like the real world still exists and Alice still has all of these like responsibilities and connections and relationships in the real world that she has to consider while she's in Wonderland. Alice's humor is so great. I laugh and giggle to myself all the time while I'm reading this book. She's so sarcastic and snarky, and there's so many pop culture references that just make this such a fresh story. There is great bisexual representation in these books, and I mean, I don't really know how to describe this. It's kind of like, you know, the love triangle trope. I don't know what shape is in this book. I don't know if it's a square. I can't even describe if it's like a square, some sort of polyhedron. I don't know. But there's a lot of angsty love romance stuff going on between a slew of characters. Just when you think that you have the romance situation figured out, a new character is introduced, and a lot of like past history is dug up, and the other characters have to figure that out. I'm trying to convey what this book made me feel without giving spoilers, so if you're confused, I'm really sorry. You should definitely read this series if you like fantasy, if you like urban fantasy, if you like really powerful and cool main characters that just make you want to be them. Like if you like Buffy, if you like different love-shaped drama scenarios, but that are like in the backdrop of a more immediate fantasy story. I can't recommend the series enough, so go read it. Please. Okay, we're gonna go over this really quickly. The 4th book, or books that I read, is Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience by William Blake. On Goodreads, they were one thing, but I have individual copies of them. These are just William Blake's poems. I read them for a class that I was taking. They're good, they're not great. I feel like William Blake kind of goes over my head sometimes, which as an English student kind of bothers me just because I feel like it's slippery. I can't get a grasp on it, and I don't know why. If you like poetry, maybe give it a try. But for context, I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Because I can see the value there, but it's just not immediately for me. After I read that, I listened to the audiobook for The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides, I think is his name. This is a no. I talked about this and ranted about it and raged in my best and worst books of 2020 video, so I'll have that linked up there. In the interest of not repeating myself, I did not like this book. I did not like the twist at the end. Even though it surprised me, I thought it was a cop-out and kind of stupid. I wasn't that interested in the main character. In fact, I hated him, and I thought we got way too much of him and his BS. I wish we got more from the female character and more from her diaries, and I don't know, this kind of turned me off from thrillers. I don't read a lot of thrillers, so maybe that's why I didn't like it, is I didn't really grasp the genre, but not for me, and I do not recommend it. Even if you like thrillers, I will not endorse it and make you read it, because it got a lot of hype and I think it was ill-founded, so peace out. I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars, and I probably should have gave it a 1, but I don't think I've ever rated something 1 star, and I don't want to start now because it's just too negative. After that, I reread Jane Eyre for a class that I took this semester, or that I was a TA for, and I marked it all up. This was my second time reading Jane Eyre, and neither time did it really wow me, and I know that's gonna hurt a lot of people because this is a beloved book in general. It's a beloved classic. So many of my peers at school worship this book, but it's just not for me. I don't know why, but I just don't like it. I don't get a lot of the hype. I feel like a lot of the cringy stuff to me is just too cringy, and a lot of like the stuff that people like about the romance just kind of doesn't sit well with me. I don't really like Rochester as a character. I don't like their romance. Not that I dislike Charlotte Bronte, because I think her other novels are really great. I absolutely love Villette, which is another of her books. So, I mean, I'm not going to tell you not to read this because it's a classic and people absolutely love it. But, I mean, if you like classics, if you like gothic romance, then give it a try. I mean, it's a hefty book. You can see the size. It's not thin. It's not fast-paced, and there's a lot of stuff that happens, but I mean, it's not terrible. It's not the worst classic I've read by far. It's like the middle tier for me, but I didn't hate it. Read Villette instead would be my recommendation. After that, I reread Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte for the same class that I read Jane Eyre for. I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I think the first time I gave it a 3. I can't really remember. Again, this is kind of down the middle for me, but for different reasons. I love discussing this book in class. I love breaking this book down. I love Heathcliff and Catherine both as characters and analyzing their characters and everything in the story. However, in terms of just reading, I don't love the narrative style. Like, I know, like, the frame narrative is popular and important for different reasons, but I hate Nellie and I hate Lockwood, and I really can't get past that when I'm reading this book. If you like dark romance and ghosts and creepy stuff and the gothic, but, like, romance that, like, doesn't end well, but, like, also kind of ends well, I don't know. It depends on how you read it. After that, I dabbled in some graphic novels. The first one I read is Paper Girls by Brian K. Vaughan, and I loved it so much. First of all, the color scheme is so bright and fun and magical. It just catches your attention, and I just like stare at the pages. Like, sometimes I would just like leave it after I read everything. I would just sit and stare at these pages because I love the colors and it's so bright and intriguing, and there's a lot of wild stuff that happens, and I have so many questions. I cannot wait to read the second and third volumes. I have both of them on hand now. I got them for Christmas. This is about 4 girls who have a paper route, and on Halloween Eve they go and deliver papers together, and a bunch of weird stuff happens. There's aliens, but there's also dinosaurs, but there's also like weird technological time travel stuff happening. I have no idea what's going on in this series. All I know is that it's intriguing. I love all of these characters, and I see so much potential for insane character growth and development that I'm really looking forward to, and I hope that that is there in the next volume. Definitely check this out if you like Stranger Things, or just if you have like a soft spot for the 80s in general. Oh, I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. Did I say that? I can't remember. Sorry, I'm a mess. Then after that, I read Witches, also produced by the same company, Image Comics, that produces Paper Girls and Saga and The Walking Dead, all of the really popular graphic novel series. So I read Witches, which is by Scott Snyder. Yeah, Scott Snyder. And this is really, really hard to describe. So there's these creepy things in the woods that hide in the trees, and I can't tell if they eat people or if they feed on people, but they're called witches with a Y, and they're like a really ancient, creepy power in, I think, New Hampshire, where our main character and her family moves. Our main character interacts with them, and it's kind of about that grapple with like life and death situations between this horror power, this like evil, creepy power that exists in the woods behind their house. It's really, really graphic and horrifying. It's gory and intense, but I didn't hate it. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars just because I feel like it's very fast-paced, but there's a lot that you need to unpack. And I'm not sure that I really unpacked it all because I don't think I had the time to, and also not enough information to do so. It kind of leaves off on a cliffhanger, so I would love to see more of this series, but I couldn't find anything when I looked it up, so I don't know. It has potential. It's pretty good. For me, this is another situation where I wanted more, and in this case, I wanted more detail and more backstory. That's all I have to say. Next, I read The Sundial by Shirley Jackson. So my aunt really loves Shirley Jackson, and I've read one of her books before. I read We Have Always Lived in the Castle, and I really, really liked that one. So I had high hopes for this, and it kind of let me down. I gave this a 2.5 out of 5 stars because I feel like the entire book you're just waiting and waiting for something interesting to happen, and there's a lot of suspense being built up, and then nothing happens. And the end really pissed me off, and I should have seen it coming, but I didn't somehow, or I like pushed it out of my head and hoped that that wouldn't be the end, and then it was, and I was really mad. It's super weird and creepy, and the characters and scenes are very strange and horrifying. Not, it's like light commentary horror. I hope that makes sense. It's like horror for the sake of commenting on the horrors of humanity and the problems and flaws in humanity and society. So it's kind of being creepy and scary for that sake. It's supposed to be about an apocalypse and the end of the world, and this particular family in this house, one of the people in the family like has this vision that they are going to be saved. It's basically like Noah's Ark. Like they're going to stay in this house and their house is going to be untouched by the apocalypse outside, and then when the apocalypse ends, they're going to be the only people left on Earth. That's the whole idea about it. But basically the whole story is you waiting for the apocalypse to happen. I mean, if you like really really slow burn stories, this might be for you. If you really like that kind of social commentary horror that's not really scary in like the gory, creepy death sense, but more in like the humanity is screwed sense. Yeah, I don't know. Then after that, I read Frankenstein. This is my third read of Frankenstein, and all I have to say is it's one of my favorite books of all time. It's great. You should read it. No matter what genre you like, no matter what you think about Frankenstein, you have to read it. It's so good. I love this book so much, and every time I read it, I find new stuff about it that I love, and I can't speak highly enough of this. I reread it for a class. I had so much fun discussing it through the lens of like environmentalist thought and nature. And yeah, so if you like nature, if you like classics, if you like the gothic, if you just like books and literature, I feel like this is for everybody. It's relatively short. Mary Shelley is a genius. Next, very quickly, we're just going to talk about Piers Plum, and I read this for a medieval literature class that I took this semester, and unless you love medieval literature, I do not recommend this book. I gave this a 2 out of 5 stars. We had a lot of really wonderful conversation about this book, but no. It's repetitive. It's all about how humanity sucks and God is the best, and we just have to live in sacrifice of humanity, basically. Overall, I'm just going to say it's a no. Don't read it. I cannot say this enough. You can go your entire life without reading this book, and that would be okay. After that, I read Ninth House. Oh my god. Okay, I've been waiting to read this book for over a year, and I finally did it, and I'm so glad that I did. It was lots of fun, creepy, dark, spooky academia vibe. Basically, this takes place on Yale's campus, and our main character gets a full ride to Yale because she can see ghosts, which is not a common thing. And she can interact with them, and it's basically following her as she is navigating the underground world at Yale and all these occult groups that are practicing occult sciences or occult stuff at Yale. I like to think of this as a murder mystery mixed with fantasy, mixed with dark academia setting. I will say it's a slow burn at first. The first 100 pages or so, I mean, I was interested, but I was like, what's like the hype? And then the further I got into this book, I was like, wow, that's the hype. That's why people really like it. And that's why people like Leigh Bardugo. This was my first Bardugo, and I do plan on reading some of the other stuff, specifically the next book in this series. I highly recommend it if you like dark academia and occult stuff. If you like unreliable narrators, but not necessarily like 100% unreliable, if you like a narrator that you have to develop trust with, or a main character that you have to develop trust with, because I feel like in this book Bardugo does a good job of making sure that you don't automatically trust the main character just because they're the main character. And that was really interesting for me. That was a fun ride to go through and learning about Alex's particular problems with herself and with the world and how she just gets through her first 2 semesters at Yale and all of the wild stuff that happens while she's there. I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars, and it was one of my favorites of the year. It didn't make it into my best top 5 of 2020, but it definitely could have been close. Alright, we got 2 more. First, we have The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. I listened to the audiobook and I loved this book so much that I bought myself a copy. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I loved it. This was my first time really reading adult romance, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was steamy, it was cute, it was fun. It gave me butterflies reading it or listening to it, just like everything that happens, and if a book can do that to me, can give me butterflies and make me feel like I am in this romance situation and all these things are happening to me, a book is incredible. Like, absolutely, it deserves 5 out of 5 stars. It's just a really entertaining book. I wasn't bored for 1 second. I feel like a lot of times in romance, like in the exposition part when things are building up, there can be boring things that happens, or just in books in general. Like, exposition can be boring sometimes, but for me, not a moment of this book was boring. It was entertaining and funny. All of the like banter between the 2 characters is great. It's a hate to love romance that takes place in the workplace. If you like hate to love romance, if you like steamy romance, if you like staying away together, kind of like tense stories, like where like they have to go somewhere else together for some reason, and then they're put in this situation where they have to act like a couple, like The Proposal, that movie with Ryan Reynolds and Sandra Bullock. That's a great example. Not really the same as what's going on here, but kind of similar actually, the more that I think about it. If you like The Proposal, you'll definitely like this book. Last but not least, I read The Rose and the Thorn by Michael J. Sullivan. This is the 2nd book in a prequel series to my favorite fantasy series of all time. Now, I know that's confusing, but basically this is the 2nd book in the Raya Chronicles, which details how the 2 main characters in the Raya Revelations meet and how they become partners in crime. What I'll say about this is there's not enough of the 2 main characters, Hadrian and Royce. There's a lot of side characters in this book and a lot of like plot, slow burn stuff. It's definitely one of the least action-packed of all of Sullivan's books, and this is the lowest rated I've ever given a Sullivan book. I think I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars just because there wasn't enough Hadrian and Royce. If you love fantasy, if you love thieves and heists and escapism, if you like funny books, if you like the movies Lethal Weapon, you have to read this book. You will absolutely love it. I can guarantee it. These books are so great. Hadrian and Royce are my favorite fictional people, I think, of all time. And that, my friends, is the end of the video. Those were the 15 books that I read in the autumn season. Comment down below and let me know if you read any of these books, what you thought of them. Do you agree with what I think? Do you agree with my rating? Do you disagree? Why? Why not? Let's have a conversation. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like, comment, and subscribe if that's your jam, and I'll see you in my next video. Happy reading, happy writing, and happy living. Bye!